I'm surrounded by all the carved stonework under the rainbow, up here on the roof of Burghley House in Lincolnshire. This is the greatest monument of the Elizabethan Renaissance, an age when fantasy was the fashion. This is Climbing Great Buildings. Throughout this series, I'll be scaling our most iconic structures from the Normans to the present day. I'll be revealing the building's secrets and telling the story of how British architecture and construction developed over 1,000 years. The next step in my journey through the evolution of British architecture brings me to Burghley House in Lincolnshire. Built for William Cecil, Lord Burghley, who was treasurer to Queen Elizabeth I over 400 years ago, it's the finest example of an Elizabethan house in the country. Elizabeth I came to the throne in 1558. She ruled England with a clever series of political and social compromises, led by a new generation of Protestant self-made elites. Foremost among them was William Cecil, Lord Burghley, who built Burghley House, the most eloquent testament to the age. Burghley House is a prodigy house, a name given to a group of enormous courtier-built dwellings which were anticipated to accommodate Elizabeth and all of her court once she made her way around the country. She could scarcely afford to build herself. It was the courtiers who created the greatest monuments of the Elizabethan age. Burghley House, like many prodigy houses, was remarkable for its size, but also for its more serious approach to a new form of architecture, classical. And that's what I'm going to be having a look at today on my climbs. I'll clamber to the top to see Lord Burghley's glorious 16th century roof. Hats off, I love it. Lose my balance over the great central courtyard. Whoa, yeah, 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 yeah. Hey. And scale 112 feet up the tower to get a look at the magnificent clock face. That is a heck of a clock, isn't it? But I won't be going it alone. I'll be joined by one of Britain's top climbers, Lucy Creamer. A team of riggers and fearless cameraman, Ian Burton. In my quest to uncover the history of England's greatest Elizabethan house. The first climb will take us up the north front so I can get a good look at its masonry and its roof. The north front was added to the original house by Lord Burghley in around 1587.
So, what are you hoping to see up here, Dr. Foyle?
We are going to have a look at the facade that was remodelled the year before the Spanish Armada happened. Right, we're making progress now anyway.
Well, we're bouncing our way up.
Much as Queen Elizabeth did. During the 16th century, the fashion for many Elizabethans of taste and wealth was to build their homes in rich red brick, but Lord Burghley had a finer source of building materials closer to home.
So I thought this was an Elizabethan building,
yeah.
And weren't they brick built?
Yeah, brick building remains popular in the Tudor period and only gets more popular, but this is near a seam of glorious golden limestone. It's all Jurassic, 200 million years old, golden colour. You can cut it in any direction, so it's called a freestone, and you can sculpt it.
Okay.
And so it's, you know, it is frankly the best building material Britain can offer, this stuff. William Cecil inherited a smaller Burghley house in 1552. Anticipating a visit from the Queen, who often travelled with an entourage of several hundred people, Lord Burghley set upon enlarging the house on a huge scale. The third story and front entrance were eventually added, but on completion, William Cecil's builders had left behind something rather odd. Amazing that from this position, you see the way in which these windows are all stepped, aren't they? Each one's higher than the next. And that the string course over the top
looks wonky.
It's cranky, isn't it? From here, you can see much more clearly what's gone on, because that curved part and that story, that's what's been added in 1587. So it's a remodelling, it's an alteration. So this is actually all part of the first building, and for some reason this string course just
They've sort of put it on a slope.
dives. I like that. These Burghley masons are... They're just adjusting, aren't they? They're making it fit. You know, hats off, I love it. Still here, isn't it? 450 years on, it's still standing. It's perfectly all right. Despite having done a few of these climbs now, I still haven't quite got used to being suspended in mid-air.
Getting quite high now.
Oh boy, we are, aren't we? Nice solid stone underneath us.
Don't look down. It's my philosophy.
William Cecil didn't just build Burghley House as a family home. He wanted to make a political statement. Prodigy houses were about one-upmanship, courtiers trying to outdo each other to impress Elizabeth, and Lord Burghley's finest example of this can be seen right at the top.
Yep, there you go.
There we go.
Oh, excellent.
There we go. Wow, look at that. That makes it all worthwhile. That's got to be one of the great architectural views of Britain. Spire, lions, pinnacles, amazing. Turrets, the lot. It's a glorious, like a giant outdoor sculpture gallery. Incredibly impressive, and obviously meant for display, probably from a distance, but also close up, no doubt about that. It's very finely cut. And it looks like a lost city, something more exotic than the Elizabethan age itself. It looks, with these columns, like the ruins of ancient Rome. So, for me to get to grips with it and understand it a bit better, I think I'd better have a mosey around. Up here on the roof at Burghley House, we see the English Renaissance really coming to life. Toward the end of the 16th century, European influences started to emerge in English architecture. The European Renaissance was based on the thought and art of ancient Greece and Rome. Not having travelled across Europe to see Renaissance buildings at first hand, many Englishmen built on a more or less traditional model, adding Greek and Roman ornament where they saw fit. On the roof of Burghley, you see these great chimneys cast as Doric columns. You see obelisks everywhere and round arches, making this one of the most fantastical and imaginative examples of the English Renaissance. Back in the 16th century, this roof may not have only been a place from which to admire the surrounding landscape, it could also have been a setting in which to carry out affairs of state. If Burghley had been able to prize people away from the dining hall and bring them up to the roof space, he might have taken them aside and lobbied them in private. We're left to wonder how the conversations held on this roof might have influenced the politics of Elizabethan England. The roof is without doubt a breathtaking sight, but when building it, Lord Burghley didn't just have aesthetics to consider, he also had practicalities to take into account. There's about 1.5 acres of lead roofs at Burghley. These date to the mid-1980s when they replaced a lower, flatter roof that failed and let in water. But there's about as much acreage again of a very different kind of roof material, which lends itself to a steeper pitch. That's Collie Weston stone slates. Collie Weston stone slate is a local treasure. It's not a true slate as such, it's a sandy limestone that splits along its seams, and it's mined about 5 or 6 miles to the southwest of Burghley House. To find out how this slate is made, I'm heading underground. Laurie, how do you turn your log into slates?
Right, Jonathan, I will show you. Basically, what you do is you'll find the seam on the log, and basically you will just tap it, and you can hear it ringing. And there again, you should be able to clive that off. But what you must do is...
Hang on, clive?
Clive, yeah. Split.
Ah, right, you don't split it, you clive it.
Yeah, basically it's cliving.
So all of a sudden it's going to open up, is it?
It should do, Jonathan. It should clive into, like I say, 4 or 5 big slates.
And there's no mechanical substitute for this?
No, not at all, Jonathan. Wish there was.
I'd love to have a go if I might, Laurie.
Of course you can, Jonathan.
Oh. I think I can feel it coming off. It becomes hollow, doesn't it? It starts to ring. I think I've got it.
There you go, Jonathan, and that'll even make a shorter slate on the roof, that will.
Look at that, it's beautiful. It's really sparkly.
It is.
That would make a slate.
That would, Jonathan, yeah, that'll be all dressed and all squared up, and a little
Fabulous.
nail hole in the top.
I'm pleased as punch. Look at that. The roof of Burghley surrounds an impressive, stately courtyard. The house was originally designed as a stage on which to present Queen Elizabeth during her visits, so Lord Burghley left nothing to the imagination. He used every piece of stonework, every ornament, to add grandeur and richness to this space. In order to get a better look at William Cecil's architectural masterpiece, I'm going to perilously venture across the courtyard on something similar to a tightrope.
Wow. This is incredibly bouncy.
It looks a bit baggy. Don't pull that tower down.
I think we're going to have fun on this because we're on the same foot.
It's you and
line.
I both on this one.
It is,
All right,
yeah.
no sudden moves, Luce.
So what do you reckon to this view then?
Do you know, it's like architectural indigestion. You know? Whoa, yeah.
Hey.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that didn't make the indigestion any better. Because you don't know when to stop looking. The inner courtyard is an excellent example of the English Renaissance. Here we have up-to-date features in Greek and Roman style, combined with old Tudor influences. Interesting, though, to see that in this courtyard there are these 1, 2, 3 triumphal arches, so that when you come in through what looks like an old-fashioned gatehouse, you see that big glazed top floor, the octagonal
Leaded,
turrets. This is
yeah.
the stuff you'd see at Hampton Court 60 years before, so maybe the opening gestures about, well, look how established we are, I don't know. But then you come in here,
Yeah.
and look, the man's an ambassador on the European stage. And actually, you could be in contemporary France. What if he receives French ambassadors? You know, people from Europe, maybe Italy, who then might walk in and think, oh, I see very much up to the
You're a man
latest
of
in
the
Europe.
world.
Yeah, exactly, isn't it?
Yeah.
You are of an older order, and yet you are up to date. He's trying to cover everything here. And maybe he's speaking to different audiences. He's an ambassador after all, isn't he? A diplomat. William Cecil may have been treasurer to the Queen and a powerful statesman, but he wanted to leave a subtle reminder that he came from more humble roots. Look, there's the lions at the top.
I know.
You see? Bearing the shield, on top of them are more lions with wheat. Look, there, another wheat sheaf.
So what's the significance of wheat?
Well, he comes from a farming family.
Cecil.
Cecil, ultimately, yeah. They're not true aristocracy, but they're quite a recent nobility. His father was a more minor courtier.
Okay.
But he went on such an ascendant that it's a reminder that the fact that his money comes from
Where he's come
farming. It's
from.
not just, he's not
Well,
got
it's nice
ill-gotten
that he
gains.
acknowledged it, though.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
think. Shall we LA? Right. You had enough up here, Dr. Foyle?
Plenty, thank you, madam. I'm off.
I'm on my way as well. Ew. Wow. God, it feels so different when you're down here.
Well, of course, this is what he wants you to see, isn't it? You know, from your head height, those great towers loom over you. William Cecil wanted people to know he was from a farming background, but he was also intent on showing off his status as a lord and courtier to the Queen. Rising grandly in the east side of the courtyard and crowned with a colossal obelisk is the clock tower. I want to climb up it to get a closer and unique look at this exquisite example of English Renaissance architecture. So we're going to get up the clock tower now, Luce.
Let's do it.
We're going to meet some characters along the way.
Yeah.
Adorning the clock tower are some historical figures that Lord Burghley wanted to associate himself with. Well, there are 1, 2, 3, 4 characters.
Yeah.
And there's Aeneas, who's the legendary ruler of Troy. This is a great triumphal gateway. This is the sort of thing you'd have seen in Rome, and which Europe was aware of at this point, where the Roman emperors, having conquered foreign lands, built triumphal arches, and this is one, and this is Cecil's front door. It's a
Yeah.
triumphal arch. So how else do you convey triumph other than picking on some of the greats from history? So Aeneas of Troy, there is Paris. Who have we got here? It's Charles V.
Oh, right.
who's an early 16th century ruler of the biggest dominion in Europe.
Okay.
So Germany and Spain combined.
Wow.
And then that one is Suleiman the Great, who's the 16th century ruler of Turkey.
Okay.
They're a curious mix, aren't they? Put them all in the same room. It could be an interesting dinner party.
I know.
William Cecil didn't use just these figures to align himself with ancient history. He employed the raw ingredients of Greek building, which were later adopted and modified by the Romans to show he was well versed in classical architecture. Many Elizabethan buildings show off the connoisseurship of the patron by showing that he or she knows which order the classical columns go into. In fact, they're called classical orders.
Ah.
And they are ordered. Now, we are at level 1. See right by Ian there?
Yeah.
They're those scrolly capitals.
Okay.
And these little beauties, it goes rather like that. Now, that's the Ionic order. On the ground floor is the simpler Doric order. And the Doric order goes like this. It's much simpler. But have a look at how fat the Doric columns are.
Uh-huh.
And then look at these Ionic ones. And then look at those. The next one up.
Yeah.
That belongs to the Corinthian order. So that's the third one. And the Doric columns are quite fat.
Yeah.
The Ionic ones at first floor are medium. The Corinthian ones are skinnier.
Mm.
The point is that the Doric ones have to support quite a lot.
Okay, yeah.
And so they've got to be stocky.
Mm.
And so they have these male attributes. The Ionic ones are a medium one.
Mm.
The top ones are a more feminine order.
Mm.
They have less supporting to do because they are being supported by the Doric ones. So these towers of the orders were to show you understood the Roman way of stacking the orders, the kind of thing that you would understand if you studied the Colosseum
Okay.
or major Roman buildings. They have this system. Right, shall we go?
Let's do it. Let's meet the clock.
Luce, we've approached the Corinthian level.
Oh, yeah,
Yeah.
we have.
It's like a ready reckoner of in a lift shaft, isn't it? Would you like, sir, Ionic level or Corinthian level? Bing! Next stop, the clock.
Yes.
That is a heck of a clock, isn't it?
It's amazing. It's just as good as it looks from the ground. Wow, this is amazing. I'm really impressed. How come it's only got one hand?
Clocks of this age tend to have one hand.
Okay.
I don't think we're yet at an age with two hands on a clock. What their alternative is a sundial. And all you see is one shadow making its way around a clock. And so this is a much bigger, much better equivalent. And so totally cutting edge to them, I should think.
It's very impressive. Okay, Jonathan.
Yes.
Now for the best bit. Well, in my mind, the best bit, because we've got to crawl under these massive, awesome lions.
Right, let's get in there. The clock tower may have been at the height of cutting-edge design during the 16th century, but being a noble English lord, William Cecil wanted to stake his claim on the country's past and to remind people of England's rich history. This dramatic roof.
And he's off.
Glorious thing.
It seems incredibly complicated. Why would they have gone to so much effort to make the roof the shape it is?
When you get to this room, one of the last to be built, we're talking about in the 1580s now, so it's
Okay.
25 years or more after the house began to be built.
Right.
Then the Great Hall's constructed to look like a medieval hall. So this is a hammer beam construction. You see these beginning life in the early 14th century.
Hammer beam.
Hammer beam, yeah. The horizontal beams are the hammer beams.
Okay.
So in the 14th century, they pioneered this technique of breaking the horizontal beams down into steps. And what they found was they had this wonderfully complex-looking arrangement. So what all that adds up to is that it seems that Burghley, 25 years into building, is looking back. He's getting nostalgic now, you know, fed up with high fashions. He's looking back to old England
Yeah.
and yearning for a lost age. In 1598, just 8 years after the Great Hall was completed, Lord Burghley died. For almost 100 years, the house was left practically untouched until Burghley's descendant John Cecil, the 5th Earl of Exeter, decided to remodel its interior on a grand scale. I'm in the South Range to have a look at the remarkable artwork on the walls and ceilings. This is the best place to see how the 5th Earl left his mark on Burghley House. Now, a key feature of these prodigy houses were suites of rooms like this, grand spaces that were beyond the needs of a family and beyond the needs of just showing off, but could be given over should a monarch come and visit. Now, these rooms were all redecorated at the end of the 17th century by the 5th Earl of Exeter, and they culminate in this beautiful room, the Heaven Room, painted by the Italian Antonio Verrio. Inspired by his journeys through Europe, the 5th Earl employed Verrio to paint intricate and beautiful images from ancient mythology. John, the 5th Earl sounds an interesting character, but what did his interests extend to?
He was a great man, a modern thinking man. He was known as the travelling Earl because he went to Europe, where he brought over 350 great paintings back to Burghley.
Now, what kind of a man was Verrio?
Difficult, I think, would be the best word. He was a fiery character. There are lovely stories about him pursuing the servant girls here. The best, I think, is the cook, who he was enamoured of, and she rejected him, so he painted her on the ceiling with 6 breasts as the goddess of plenty.
It wasn't just the cook who ended up on the ceiling of the Heaven Room. Verrio also included other real people. The Earl's children were painted as cherubs. The Dean of Windsor was portrayed as Bacchus, the god of wine. And Verrio even included himself. Verrio achieved some amazing interiors. They are beautiful spaces.
Quite remarkable interiors. Probably the best painted rooms in England.
There are very few Tudor interiors left at Burghley. There's the kitchen and the Great Hall, and then this, the Roman staircase. And this is the most avant-garde of them. Think of a Tudor staircase. They tend to be oak things with an open well in the middle, whereas this has a solid wall. Big, generous stone steps, the kind of thing you'd find in an Italian or maybe a French palace. And it's vaulted too, again in stone, with lots and lots of expensively carved emblems. Amongst them, the little castles and other devices you see in Lord Burghley's arms. And they go up, and they go up, and up, and then up. The Roman staircase winds its way expensively and ostentatiously right the way up to the top of the building, and then through that small door you emerge onto the leads. The point is that this was a thoroughfare, a major route to bring guests up onto the top of the building to take in Lord Burghley's estates. And what a spectacular view. For the end of my journey through Burghley House, I'll be abseiling down the west front to get a closer look at what was the original grand entrance intended to welcome Queen Elizabeth when Cecil built it in 1577. It houses the state rooms, which include the bedroom designed to accommodate the Virgin Queen.
Just beware.
Oh boy! My eyes just had to adjust themselves to a much greater focal distance than I expected. Right. It's a winner from any angle, isn't it?
Yeah.
Burghley looks great when you look at it. It's fabulous when you look from it.
Yeah.
When you're inside it. It's a great irony that such a glorious house containing 115 rooms and which took 32 years to build was never actually seen by the Queen. She attempted a visit in 1565, but was turned back during an outbreak of smallpox. But proof of the expense and attention to detail in this building can be seen in every square inch of the house.
Yeah. Wow.
Look at these little guys.
It's Fantastic.
It's amazing condition, isn't it? Look, every little grain of wheat on that sheaf.
Yeah.
And the hair in these tiny lions' manes. Gosh, you could pick them up, couldn't you?
Yeah.
Children's toys, they're great. But their teeth are still sharp. I don't get how that happens. The stone's just so good. Also bearing Lord Burghley's family crest are these striking golden gilded gates. One of the 5th Earl's greatest additions to the house, they were designed to catch the glow of the sun as it set in the west. The 5th Earl of Exeter commissioned Jean Tijoux, a French ironsmith who worked at Hampton Court and St Paul's Cathedral, had a little foundry off Piccadilly, and some of the English accounts call him John Tissue. We wanted him to be one of ours. But he made this gorgeous set of gilded gates as the western entrance to Burghley House. And remember, it was Lord Burghley's original western entrance front, and the 5th Earl of Exeter wanted to commemorate that. Not only that, but the family heraldry with these lions bearing a wheat sheaf as the central emblem. These are a very gilded set of gates compared with many of the period, but, you know, who can deny a family like the Earls of Exeter the way to show off like King Midas, because it's such rich farmland in this area. It's just wealth everywhere. And to open these gates and divide the sheaf of wheat, you know, it's like this metaphor of a harvest every time you enter the house. It's still got something of that atmosphere of bounty today, isn't it? It's a treasure house. Burghley House was designed not just as a family home in the country, but a palace by proxy for one of Britain's most iconic and distinguished monarchs, Elizabeth I. It's sad and maybe a bit ironic that she never actually made it here, but nonetheless it survives today in astonishing condition in what is, to my mind, the most romantic overture of architecture of Elizabethan England. Next time, how Sir Christopher Wren achieved the ultimate marriage of science and religion to create one of Britain's most iconic landmarks, St Paul's Cathedral.
And there's another great building just waiting to be climbed here on BBC HD tomorrow. Now we're paying a visit to the Museum of Life in an hour. First, though, it's The One Show.